Thank you for letting me be here. It's been quite some time since I've been on this campus. Now, I'm looking there, okay. I'm not used to the, if you take nothing else back from what I have to say, the most important thing to know to have a very successful career is to be at the right place at the right time. I want to thank you for this award, but more importantly, I want to thank you for the education that I received here at UC Berkeley. That includes the public health school. I'm also a graduate of the business school here. I'm a graduate of the UCSF-UCB joint medical program here, so I owe the taxpayers of California a lot. I also want to say thank you to the other institutions around the world that have tried to drum some knowledge into my head, and that includes City College of San Francisco, San Francisco State University, the University of Washington and Johns Hopkins that taught me some clinical medicine, and the University of Cape Town in South Africa that taught me, and because I was there, taught a lot of people in Washington that African universities and universities around the world can do a damn good job of education. So thank you. President Bush used to call me the architect of PEPFAR, and as was mentioned, that's probably saved over 26 million lives now. This is what I mean about being at the right place at the right time. I don't take credit for any of that. I was at the right place at the right time. The credit for PEPFAR goes to no one other than George W. Bush. It was his idea, he pushed through, and it was a privilege for me to work for him and make it happen. But it was also thousands of other people who worked in anonymity and in humility to make it all work. One of them is sitting here as your chancellor, and her husband and other people. So that's where the credit goes. I just happened to be lucky enough to be at the right place at the right time. So imagine this, you're graduating today, and this was my story. Exactly 20 years, almost to the day of my graduation from Berkeley, I found myself in the Oval Office with the President of the United States for what was supposed to be a 5-minute meeting and ended up being about an hour-long meeting. And the question that he asked me when I walked in was, do these new AIDS drugs really work the way they tell me they do? And I could say, because I was on the faculty at Johns Hopkins and worked in the AIDS clinic, again with a lot of people that we know together, I could say, Mr. President, I can look you in the eye and tell you that I have seen my patients turn away from death's door and go back to their families and their lives. These drugs work. We talked a lot about, and again, that's what I mean, it wasn't just one person, it was all the research and the work of public sector, private, making this thing happen. And I talked a lot about my experience clinically. I was surprisingly interested in what it was like to be a doctor and doing this work. Also my experience of helping to design and set up the Ryan White Care Act programs in the United States. And I was proud to be the first director of that entire program, and I worked a lot with Senator Kennedy's staff and Congressman Westmoreland's staff and a lot of people on both sides of the aisle to make that happen. At the end of that conversation, President Bush looked at me and he said, "You're not telling anybody about this. Number two, I will get you," now remember, you're 20 years out from school, "I will get you however much money you need to turn the epidemic around in Africa. But do not come back in here and tell me just to write a bigger check." And I took those orders, and that's how I ended up being the director of the White House Office on AIDS Policy. What I want to say, I'm not used to working with a teleprompter, so I'm still a little confused, bear with me. So that appointment made me one of the first openly gay or lesbian men or women in the United States to serve on a White House council. Now, White House Council, I was on the Domestic Policy Council, and I'll come back to that, but that's the National Security Council. That is it made me a personal advisor to the president. And that created pretty soon a problem for me, and that's what I really want to focus on for a minute here. In 1996, President Clinton signed the Defense of Marriage Act, which made gay marriage illegal in the United States. That was, for reasons I won't get into, there was a tremendous amount of pressure on the White House, on President Bush, and from some of the people who were the strongest supporters, who became the strongest supporters of PEPFAR, for him to propose and support a constitutional amendment to gay marriage, banning gay marriage. So imagine my position in this very visible role as an openly gay man, advising the president on his domestic policy council, where gay marriage is becoming discussed. I talked to him privately about it, and when I'm dead and gone, in my safe deposit box, somebody will find a handwritten letter from him discussing this and his reaction to my discussion with him. But I couldn't say anything. And so I was crucified by most of my, quote, community. And I get it. I'm in the White House and gay marriage is being discussed as something to be banned. The President Bush is sending signals that he might move, and he did move to propose a constitutional amendment against it. And I was accused of being a coward. I was accused of being overly ambitious, a traitor to the community. I lost many, many friends who wouldn't speak to me, many people who were my academic colleagues at Hopkins. And of course, when the 2003 State of the Union address was made and President Bush announced the $15 billion to go to address AIDS in Africa and around the world, suddenly I became a hero again because it was clear that I was very involved in making that happen. I was forgiven my sins. I was brought back into the community. I wish I would say I was a big enough man that I forgave theirs, but I haven't. It was a very, very tough time. So my point in telling this story is this. I had to choose between two issues that I felt very strongly about: my right to get married and rights of people in Africa and around the world to live. And it was clear to me that it became clear to me as I thought about it that my feelings about same-sex marriage did not outweigh my feelings about the sacredness of human life and saving lives. And I knew that if I, to quote Dennis Prager, I had to decide what would I die for. Would I die to protect gay marriage? The truth is I wouldn't. Would I die to protect millions of lives around the world? The answer is that I would. But that meant that I had to remain silent in the face of enormous and personal, painful criticism from people who I knew and loved, who I thought knew and loved me. But then that's the way it played out. And so my solution was silence. I had to weigh these different feelings that I had, and I chose to remain silent because I knew that a lot of PEPFAR in the ability to get PEPFAR through and through the White House and to get him to support it had to do with a personal relationship I had with President Bush and his trust in me that I would have his back. So as you consider your careers, you are going to be handed your own moral equations to solve. We live in a country, you might not know it sitting here in Berkeley, but we live in a country that is very, very divided politically and very closely divided. If you go into the public sector, if you go into work in public health, if you want to have a big impact in the world, you're going to have to compromise. And if you compromise, that means you have to make choices about things you may, like I did, about things you really feel strongly about and things that you may value. You may challenge to weigh your feelings against your values, and you may have to make a hard decision. So if you aren't sure of your values, if you haven't spent some time thinking about your values, and you talked about roots earlier, if you haven't looked into the roots of your values, where do they come from? They come from your family, religious background, philosophy, from UC Berkeley. But know what your values are and know where they come from, because the compromises, the outcome of the compromises you may make will make or break your career and will make or break the world. So here's my advice to you on this happy occasion. And again, congratulations to all of you. Do the hard work necessary to understand, to clarify, and to articulate your values. Remember that values are less about the strength of your feelings than they are about the strength of your character to act on them. And finally, I believe that spiritual fortitude is essential in all of this. Work on cultivating that too. Thank you very much for this award.